Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two musicians who used to play in a band together and share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. If you haven't seen the movie we're talking about, then don't worry. The first half of the episode will be pretty high level and spoiler free, and then we'll play a warning before we start talking about any major plot twists in the ending. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Did you ever watch the TV show Lost?
I watched like maybe 4 or 5 episodes.
I didn't watch it when it was new. Like, it was probably 2009 before I got into it.
Yeah.
But that was one of the first ones where ABC had like the whole thing up for streaming on their website.
Right, yeah.
And back when I was traveling so much for that refining job, that was what I'd watch at night in my hotel room.
Oh.
And I remember there's like this huge online community around it. And it was kind of a formula show. Like, each week they're going to give you just enough information to keep you interested in kind of the running mysteries that have been raised. Yeah. But they're also going to like introduce new questions and give you kind of good like food for thought for like theorizing. And so the person who was behind that show was J.J. Abrams, and his production company was called Bad Robot. So that Bad Robot thing played at the end of every episode. And that also played at the beginning of Cloverfield, because that was also, he produced Cloverfield.
Oh, gotcha.
And it's really interesting now looking back on it, because I saw Cloverfield in 2008 before I had seen any of Lost. But coming back to it now, with having seen, like seasons worth of that show, there are so many similarities. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah, because this is the first movie that I remember that had like internet hype ahead of time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it seemed like it had forums before it was even out. And all of the, like speculation and fan theories and all that were like a really big thing. And in doing some reading, I guess that was really deliberate. Like, J.J. Abrams saw that was happening with Lost and that it was successful, and then realized that there was like a ripe group of people that are interested in this type of movie, and really played it up from like that aspect. So the marketing and stuff around it in the beginning was really kind of cryptic and gave you like just a little bit of information to keep you interested, and then just a little bit more, and then kind of in the movie itself it was the same way. So anyway, that's a really long-winded way of saying, it was interesting coming back to this movie from that perspective.
Yeah.
And
that's a smart way to do it.
Yeah, and I remember when I saw the movie initially, I was not that into it. Mm-hmm. Like, I just didn't get it. And then watching it now and thinking, like, this is a J.J. Abrams thing, it made a lot more sense to me. Mm-hmm. So
hopefully you can help make sense to me about this movie.
I'll do my best.
Good luck.
All right.
Game on.
Game on. Challenge accepted.
Yeah.
All right, let me introduce this thing and we'll get to it.
Okay.
In 2008, Paramount Pictures released the much-anticipated monster movie Cloverfield, which chronicles the struggles of several young adult friends who make their way through New York City during a Godzilla-scale monster attack. They fight to survive while also trying to rescue another friend who is trapped in a damaged apartment building. Cloverfield was made on a budget of $25 million and brought in over $170 million at the box office, thanks to a clever marketing campaign and generally positive reviews.
Perfect.
So, I'm very curious to know if you were able to learn anything concrete about this movie, or if searching for it just led you to a bunch of forums speculating about what the monster's name was or something.
Yeah, it was a mixture of both, actually. But, I stuck to my guns, and I found a couple facts about it.
Cool. Lay them on.
So, this is probably the most important fact about it. Not really. The head of the Statue of Liberty?
Yes.
That's actually was like a lot bigger than the actual head of the Statue of Liberty.
Oh.
So, and it's okay to say this because it was in the preview. Mm-hmm. One of the previews for the movie was, the Statue of Liberty head kind of rolling in the street for a second, landing, and compared to people, like, it was just way out of proportion. And they had to do that just because it was like you see a little. I don't know if you saw the actual size of the Statue of Liberty's head, it probably wouldn't be as dramatic as like a huge one. And people, when you think of Statue of Liberty, you think it's huge.
Well, and wasn't it the same at the end of Planet of the Apes?
Planet of the
Apes.
Apes.
Wasn't it like way over proportion?
Yeah, Planet of the Apes, and then was it Lost in New York or something like that, or Escape from New York, it was kind of a nod to that movie as well. But, so kind of like what you were saying, like in a way, this was inspired by Godzilla. He said he was in Japan with his son, who dragged him to some toy stores. We saw the Godzilla toys and thought we need to make our own monster, and not like King Kong. So he kind of wanted to duplicate kind of Godzilla,
like the American Godzilla.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even though it was kind of done with King Kong, but he goes on to say like King Kong. He says King Kong's adorable. And I wanted something that was just insane and intense, so take it for what it's worth. However, Godzilla didn't influence the monster's design. There's a person named Neville Page. They have the task of creating the 250-foot tall Cloverfield monster known as Clover. They go on to say, I'm not recalling being told to not do Godzilla-like designs. It's more implicit, like since it was not a Godzilla movie, basically don't make Godzilla. That makes sense, but yeah. Anyway, so the movie itself was inspired, but the monster was to not look like Godzilla. And then this is probably a well-known fact. I kind of knew about this, and in fact, Katie even mentioned her dad had gone and watched the movie with, I think, her brother, and like it made him sick. But this is a lot of movie goers apparently like vomited from how shaky the handheld images were. They experienced like vertigo and they got sick, and it's kind of like what happened with like the Blair Witch, basically. Like, a lot of people have problems with that, even though this one was like 10 times worse than Blair Witch as far as like shakiness goes. Yeah,
the rapidness of the camera movement, for sure.
Yeah, and then they also the last one is that they kind of kept the story, like the people who were reading for the movie, they didn't want them to know what was in the story. And I don't know if that's normal. Like, I don't know if you necessarily want to give it away. So it was so much so that I can't remember the specific actress, mainly because I can't read my handwriting, but she actually thought that she was coming on for like a romantic comedy kind of movie. And then she realized it was like,
boy, was she wrong.
I know. Yeah, I was like, oh, it's like the opposite. But it was so under wraps that, which I think it needed to happen. But anyway, so they kind of kept it secretive.
Yeah. Well, and that makes sense too, just because it seemed like so much of the marketing, at least from what I read about it, kind of leading up to this movie, was meant to be very vague and to encourage speculation and discussion. And so I think it was creating an appetite for more details. And if anyone had them, they would go out. You know what I mean? So I can see why the secrecy would have been an important part of the whole, kind of life cycle of the movie.
Yep. That's a good point.
But yeah, so we usually start talking about what were the people who made the movie trying to do and how well did they do it. You got into it a lot, talking about it being inspired by Godzilla. But the way that I thought about this movie was it's like kind of a twist on a monster movie, because it's taking the perspective of like a found footage movie of footage that takes place during the monster attack. So like if a Godzilla movie was shot from a handheld camcorder by someone in Tokyo or something, like, I thought that was just a really interesting twist. And so that was the route that they went with it. And I think, one of the biggest elements of this movie was that, and it was obviously deliberate, was that you didn't get a lot of direct shots of the monster.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot of seeing movement in the distance or in the sort of the corner of the camera, or catching just the edge of the monster as it went around a corner or something. And so it was meant to be very, I think, disorienting. Like that was a big part of it.
Yeah, trying to like show that they were all kind of disoriented.
Yeah, just like the full chaos that would have been happening on the ground. And so I thought that was kind of a neat take and a pretty original one.
I think it definitely got it. It was definitely, it accomplished the goal of like disorienting the audience. You know.
Well, and to your point earlier about people leaving the theater and feeling sick, I thought this one, there were several times when watching it on my TV, it was almost like when you get on a boat for the first time and you have to get your sea legs under you because everything feels like really, really unfamiliar and not okay. That's how I felt in probably the first 20 minutes of this movie, because the camera was just so jerky and so all over the place.
It was awful.
And I can imagine in a theater where it's like a much larger picture and it's like a more immersive experience, that would have been rough. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and as far as that goes, it just didn't make, I mean, it definitely, the shakiness of the camera frustrated me, honestly, throughout the movie. Like, it's like, you could have had a lot more still shots and like, as I start to lose it when I get older, like now that I'm getting older and I'm losing it, like, I don't know if it's like OCD or something, but just like a lot of the shots was like cut off at the top in a way, and it was it really bothered me. I was just like, just a little bit higher, just a little, like even when like like when Rob's like talking to the camera, but like it's still moving, and it was like it almost seems unnecessary. But if you film anything, and if it's zoomed in at all, and you try to film something, how shaky that is. So it's like I understand, but at the same time, like, come on. Make it easy.
It was kind of difficult to watch in a lot of cases. But yeah, I guess as far as like other visual effects and stuff, I thought the CG was pretty dated. And some of the scenes, it was way more distracting than others. Like, overall, there was a lot of movement, and the camera was super jumpy. So you weren't, like, looking directly at something. And I think it was fine for those types of scenes. But occasionally there was one where it was more of, like, a direct shot on something. And it was just like, oh, that's unfortunate. Like, we talked before about some movies, the CG being, like, PS1 graphics. And I thought this one was pretty guilty of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was also like, man, it was only 2008, right when this came out, so it's like, that's not too long ago. That's still a long time ago. 11 years, but still, anyway.
Well, and again, it's like we talk about with the special effects from anything. The goal is for it doesn't have to be good, it just has to not be distracting. And in this one, it was kind of distractingly bad in a couple of spots. But
and it made you wonder, like, you may have kind of touched on this, but it made you wonder, like, were they trying to rely on the shakiness to to cover it? Like, that's what I was thinking. Like, like, you're trying to get away with it here, but at the same time, I got to think when I watch these movies, like, technically, they're, story is basically like a monster destroying, like, Manhattan. And it's like that, you can't do that without some sort of CGI,
true, yeah.
So it's like there had to be a lot used here, and so,
Yeah, and I think, for the majority of the movie, it was well done and pulled off in a way that fit. It's just for sure. I think we're on the same page on that. Yeah. So. Then I guess the sound was kind of big and boomy. Like, it makes sense because it was found footage, so there wasn't a lot of music or, background strings or anything. But I did feel like that because there wasn't music or background stuff, they felt the need to keep the actors talking at all times. There were some places where they were talking just to talk, and Hudson's character kind of fit that. Like, he was obviously like the talkative friend, but it still got a little old as the movie went on.
Definitely got old as the movie went on. Yeah.
And then from a story perspective, I mean, I think it was very much J.J. Abrams being J.J. Abrams. Much like Lost, it focused on the personal lives of the people in the middle of the unexplained circumstances and not so much on the circumstances themselves. And so we'll get into that a lot more post-spoiler, but I think that's an important thing to note about the movie is that really the focus on it seemed to be the people and the relationships between them. Yeah. And so because of that, acting was kind of important for being able to pull it off. And I was curious what you thought of that from a quality perspective.
I guess if you know, like after you kind of explain the J.J. Abrams thing to me, that's like, okay, this makes sense. Before that, it was a lot of confusing aspects, which yet again we can kind of get into the post. One thing I think you can also get away with as far as like acting goes when it comes to found footage, I feel like there's a little bit of a break there. You know, like the Blair Witch Project, that, I mean, they were not great actors or actresses, but they were able to get away with it, and I think that was kind of the case here. I didn't necessarily notice. I think if I were to say anything as far as like how, like, my one complaint kind of with the acting is like, if you're gonna have that goofy funny guy in the movie, that's like, make sure they're goofy and funny. You know what I mean? Yeah. So
for me, it was a little distracting in the beginning because Juice from Sons of Anarchy and
he did have his mohawk.
What the actor that played Hudson? His name's TJ, and he's in Silicon Valley. And I can't remember the name of his character. In Silicon Valley. But anyway, so seeing those two people who I've spent like a lot of hours with in other roles, in a role where it's supposed to be found footage just like normal people, was weird. It took me a while to get over that, but I thought overall, like, the acting and the performances were pretty good. I felt like they fit what they needed to be for the movie to do what it was trying to do.
It also kind of helps that, like, you know, 70% of this movie, the actors or actresses were like running in the opposite direction for being filmed.
Right. So, when you're the least interesting part of the scene, you don't really have to do a lot to not ruin it. Yeah, I agree. So before we get into the spoiler warning and the other stuff, because that's where I really want to spend most of my time, who do you think would like this movie, or who would you recommend it to?
I'm not even sure if there's a group of people out there that are like huge found footage, you know, horror movie fans. Like, that's all they watch or anything. Yeah. But I mean, this is the same case, I guess. You know, this is a found footage, and they are trying to take the found footage in a different direction. Yeah. And which I definitely appreciate, you know. So, I mean, like, the Cloverfield universe is kind of an interesting one. Like, I feel like, and so I think I would recommend it to people who are more interested in like the story behind the horror movies, or like the like, this is, it was interesting to me because it's like, oh, okay, they're like trying to create their own universe here. Like, that's pretty cool. It's kind of like what, you know, they did with the Avengers and all that. I'm kind of going around in circles here of who I would recommend it to, because I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan, but I'm glad I watched it. You know, so here's what I'm gonna say: if you haven't watched this movie yet, you should watch it. However, you may or may not like it, but you should still watch it.
Way to take a firm stance.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think this movie is for people who like mystery and speculation. I don't think it's for people that want like a full spelled out answer for everything. And also fans of monster movies. I felt like it was a pretty original one of those, which I haven't seen a lot of like monster movies post 2000 that I felt that way about.
I think we should just like cut out my part, except for that second half, and then it'll make me sound less stupid.
I don't think it's stupid. I think it's just thinking out loud, because you just watched this movie today, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you've had like 30 minutes to process? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. All right, let's play that spoiler warning.
Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. If it's not obvious enough, warning, spoilers.
Alright, so I've been trying to be better at life.
Yeah.
And also...
Failing miserably.
I know.
But yeah.
But the most recent thing I'm doing is I'm trying to limit myself to one love and one hate on these episodes.
Oh.
Because that's probably like the least interesting part.
Yeah.
But
mine's who you recommended to. That's the least interested for me.
Well, maybe we could do something about that. But
No,
anyway,
I'm cool with doing it.
Okay. So, but with the love and hate, I feel like it's that chance to talk about something that doesn't really fit anywhere else in the episode. And it's something that we can talk about like post spoilers.
And I always fail like miserably at it because then I start talking about my scenes because it was my favorite thing.
Oh, yeah,
so I'm gonna stick to your plan.
Okay, cool.
You did not fail in this situation.
Yes. I got my one for the week, so
Hey.
yeah. Anyway, the thing that I loved was the pace. It felt like it never held still for very long, and I feel like a lot of movies that are similar to this one in a story perspective get way too bogged down in the individual characters and them going back and forth and having drama and stuff. Whereas I kept waiting for a scene where I could write down that's where it spent too much time and I hated it.
Right.
But really it kept moving and it really kept you engaged and the action continued. And I feel like if it had been any longer at all, I would have been super annoyed and complained about it.
Yep.
And I still think the ending scene I didn't like the way that they wrapped it up. But overall, in general, the movie was almost the exact right length that it should have been for what it was and what it was trying to do. And I applaud them for that because I think movies are really bad about getting the length correct.
Yeah. The old 80-20 rule.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I agree with you. Like, that was the one thing like I noticed, and I definitely I appreciate the whole, like, I love the idea of creating something of your own, like, kind of that whole universe and the monster. Like, I like that, but I definitely think I enjoyed the fact that it was fast paced. Like, it's once it got to the action, it stayed on, for most of it. So I think that would have to be mine as well.
Cool.
Now, as far as things I don't like, you keep this kind of short. Not really.
Get comfortable.
Yeah. Everyone sit down and listen. So, like kind of like with the Bird Box, how things were just convenient.
Yes.
Things were just convenient with this movie.
Fair.
A couple examples are, just like running through the subway and all of a sudden they're at an army hospital. Mm-hmm. And they had to randomly... It was just kind of confusing. And then like, a building is just leaning up against another and not collapse. And we're going to go up all the stairs. And so, like, there was just too many convenient things in the movie that it honestly kind of pissed me off because I was just like, God damn, like, you have such a good opportunity here, but I don't know, I can't write it. So take my word for what it is. Yeah. But one thing that we definitely have to appreciate, and this actually is, I'm going to speak for both of us, this is both of our love about the movie. We got to appreciate the fact that Lily did all that running around with high heels for like 75% of the movie. Oh, yeah, the struggle's real. That was a true hero form. Yeah. Like, we understand everyone can dress how they want. Mm-hmm. The reason why we don't wear high heels, and the only reason, is just because if there's ever a situation like that, we wouldn't be able to run in them. I can hardly walk in them. Oh, I can. I saw her running in them, and I was like, oh, damn, that's some calf muscles right there. She took them off when she went up the stairs, but still. Well, yeah, she was keeping up, too. It wasn't like she was struggling. Yeah. So. She was, like, actually in, like, second place the whole movie. Yeah. Until she died. Spoiler. Then she was the first place. Yeah. At dying. Getting out of that terrible situation. Yeah. My hate was, I felt like the movie went a little too far down the raise a bunch of questions that don't ever get answered road. Like, I totally get encouraging speculation and giving room to wrestle with it and not holding,
your hand through everything. But I also think there's a fine line between being clever and being lazy as a writer.
Right.
And one thing that it just almost felt a little lazy from the story perspective. And like even the characters were just throwing out stuff like they were posting on an internet forum. Like, think about it. If the military was ready to respond so quickly, then maybe that's because they knew it was going to happen, because they created the creature. But there was nothing in the story to support that. There were absolutely no answers. So there was no real like narrative strength to any of it. So it was just like, we've created this situation and it's super scary and the characters are speculating about it.
Right.
And from and I totally get that from a franchise perspective and building that world and knowing that there are going to be comic books and other movies and all this stuff to kind of fill in the universe, that's fine.
Yeah.
But as someone going in and watching just one movie and not having all of that additional context, it just didn't really deliver. You know what I mean? Like it didn't feel satisfying at the end of the movie, to me at least.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, not insulting. I definitely see what you're saying. Like, it's sometimes you want your handheld, but not too long.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also it's kind of frustrating that they were in New York and not one slice of pizza was seen.
They probably couldn't get franchise rights for it.
Right. Like, Katie and I want to go to New York. I mean, especially now that it's been demolished. And all I want to do is go to pizza places.
Yeah.
Like, she wants to go to like museums and stupid shit. And I'm like, no, we want to go to best pizza.
And then second best pizza.
And then second best pizza. And the third best pizza.
Yeah. Like a pizza tour.
Yeah. So, what were some of your favorite scenes about this movie?
So I didn't necessarily do favorite so much as just ones that really stood out to me. And I make the distinction because, so we've talked a lot about how it's kind of cliche to start off with like text on the screen that implies the movie is based on a true story. And in this one, I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit in the beginning because it's like property of the U.S. government,
right,
on like this grainy home videotape. But then it said retrieved from site formerly known as Central Park. And I thought that was kind of interesting from a found footage movie as a way of piquing your interest early, because that's a very real place. And it's kind of like when there's that like super violent scene at the beginning of the movie and then it goes back to like normal life, but you know what type of movie it's going to be based on what you just saw. Like the beginning of it follows. And in this one, it wasn't violent so much as it was like retrieved from the site formerly known as Central Park. So it's like, well, what the hell's there now? You know, it just kind of raises questions. And so I thought it did a good job of
that's a good point.
like piquing your interest in the way that it wanted you to engage with the movie throughout the rest of the movie. So that I thought was interesting and it caught my attention. And
I definitely see what you're saying, because it, like with this movie, I think the thing was, and I was having trouble picking out a favorite scene, or like, you know, a favorite scene, because it was almost like, so because of the fast pace that we were kind of talking about, that was almost just like one really long scene there towards the end, especially with the being found footage, you know, style. There wasn't like, oh, that's, you know, this is crazy, you know. I think if I had to pick out one, I liked when HUD and Rob and the girl who was in the, what was her name?
Beth is the one that they went to rescue.
Beth.
Okay.
When they're in the helicopter and they're shooting down and they see like the monsters like getting shot at, and it definitely, it reminded me kind of like the like King Kong, where, you know, he's getting shot at by the pilots and like not really affecting him. It kind of starts slowing. Anyway, like it just seemed like, oh, that's a really cool scene. The monster's hand kind of comes up and, you know, slides down the building, breaking like all the glass and stuff. I was like, oh, that's a pretty interesting shot there. So but that was also like when, I think that was one of the times where like Hudson or HUD was like doing his whole like Rob like the and it was just like, dude, shut. Like if I was a pilot, I would have been pissed.
Get this kid out of here.
I know, I would have been so mad.
But
I do have to say, I also appreciate how the military was portrayed in this movie. It seems like a lot of times in horror movies, they're portrayed like almost like maliciously.
Yeah, like
you
evil.
know, like they're and it's like this time, like no, they were trying to help. You had like that nice guy, like, tell them like no, come here, and there's actually room on the helicopters, which was also kind of weird. But it was like I definitely liked that they, you know, that was how it went down with them.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
We gotta respect the men in, you know, in suits in what
uniform. Yeah,
fucking A, man.
Yeah, they do something I'd be too scared to do.
God dang right. Yeah. But killing monsters in New York, I would never be able to do that.
Nope. Count me out. But mainly just because I have no desire to go back to New York.
Oh, you don't?
Big, crowded, and dirty. No, I might. But yeah, it's actually I do want to go back and see the Freedom Tower.
Now that you've heard about.
Well, when I was there in
best pizza.
Yeah, that too. When I was there in 2009, it was just like a giant hole in the ground.
Oh, and,
that was really a crazy experience to see it, because I mean you've seen the footage on TV and you've seen like those towers like towering above everything else in the area, and then you go there and you see how tall all of those other buildings around them were, and you're like, oh, they were like that much bigger than those buildings, and now it's just like this giant hole in the ground. It was crazy.
You know what's crazy is I was actually, another fact I read about the movie was talking about the inspiration was kind of about the mayhem that happened in New York when those towers went down. I didn't necessarily want to say it at the beginning, but since it's on topic now, they were talking about trying to capture how crazy it could be if an attack were to happen there. So
like on the ground in the middle of it all. Yeah, that's dark, but
crazy stuff, man.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I got another scene. Okay. When it goes from, and I'm curious if you were confused by this as well, but in the beginning, it's like the footage of Rob and Beth in like Rob's dad's condo or something, like in a high rise.
Yeah.
And it's them just like hanging out and being all like happy couple. And then all of a sudden it cuts to Rob's brother, I guess, and his girlfriend, and they're like planning the party for Rob, but you don't really see like the brother on camera that much. And so I couldn't tell if that was like hopping forward in time and it was supposed to be the same guy. I was like, I don't think that's the same girl in the previous scene, but they seem to be acting the same way, because it was really like, it threw me. I didn't realize that it was supposed to have changed like time and place and people so much.
Yeah.
And then like later you figure out that, oh, they're doing this like video diary for Rob at his going away party, and they're taping over the tape that had him and Beth on it. And they do some cool stuff with like the flashbacks in between that way. But it really took me, it was very, like many other things in the movie, disorienting to me originally when it just did like that hard cut from Rob and Beth to Rob's brother and the girl.
Yeah, actually, I thought I knew what would happen, but now that you explained it, I have no idea what happened.
Oh.
Like, I didn't realize that was a combo between Rob and his brother, Jason.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So, anyway, and so a big section of my notes was me trying to like make sense of that, and then once I figured out what was going on with the
then they
like
had
tape over,
yeah, they had to put it in at the end so that they could show the monster landing in the ocean. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. So, anyway,
that was a nice apartment.
Yeah, it was.
You just cleared it up for me, because I was like, how did they afford to live in a place like that?
Yeah, they didn't. So.
Yeah.
And then the only other scene I had before we get into the ending stuff, because those scenes are interesting to me, when they were walking down the subway tracks and then they got attacked by like the mini monsters in the dark, I felt like that was the best horror scene in the whole movie.
Yeah.
I thought that was so intense, because it's just like, you don't see what's going on. The camera's moving really fast. It's shaking. There's all the yelling, and there's like the sound effects, and you get these like brief glances of these super like mean looking creatures, and that was probably my favorite scene of the movie.
Yeah, I mean it definitely helped out too, because they were like, oh, the rats, and then they realized all the rats were running.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, I thought that was legit. Like I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. Like that makes sense. Like, I think, one of the things I was bothered by were like the parasite little things that came off of it. Because it's like, you can't, like, if you're just away from the big monster, you'll be fine. But then they had it, they added the parasites to add the extra scare into it. But yeah, I think as far as horror movie scenes go, I think that and the scenes where they're running up the stairs would be the only two major, actual horror scenes.
Yeah.
Because you didn't. I mean, this wasn't like a scary film. Was this a scary film for you?
No, I mean it was intense, but it wasn't like one that had me like shuddering afterwards or anything. Yeah.
Like an action film. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess getting into the ending or endings, as I think of them, like there's the scene with the helicopter where it crashes, and then HUD gets out and has the camera, and then he looks up and like the monster's there over him, and then you see him like get eaten from the perspective of the camera that then falls back out of the monster's mouth to the ground. But they do like that super like straight on shot of the monster's face at that point, and that was like the grand reveal, like the thing that you'd been wanting to see the whole movie.
Yeah. And
it was kind of underwhelming to me. That was one of those where like the CG was distracting, not enhancing. So yeah,
it had like the monster had that red, like kind of like a puffing part on its head, like kind of like where its temple was, and like for a second it looked like it was almost like a balloon attached to it, and then you realize, oh no, the head's like, it was just kind of confusing for me. Like it was just like, that's like a kind of a letdown in a way. But
yeah, I think the movie would have been better without that. I don't think it was required at all. And
I agree.
Yeah.
But then, he couldn't be there for the very end, because that would have just been weird.
Oh no, I'm fine with him getting eaten. It was the whole like having to have that like long shot of the monster's face that I didn't like. So but then after that, Rob and Beth get the camera and they take off, and they end up hiding under a bridge in Central Park, and they stop and record like a goodbye before the military bombing starts. And that was the only scene in the movie that felt like it went on a little too long for me.
It definitely did.
And it was such a momentum killer, being right there at the end. But I mean, I do like how it ended in the, they weren't able to get out, and they did, it was unfortunate, but from, I guess, like what we expect from horror movies, like people don't survive. And that also was a nice tie-in back to the beginning where it talked about, what used to be Central Park, because I was kind of curious how it would come back to that. And so yeah, I mean, like I didn't hate it conceptually, but just the execution of it maybe wasn't my favorite.
Yeah. First off, them saying goodbye like took super long. Yeah. And it was also like they weren't necessarily kind of scared at that or like upset, I didn't necessarily think. It was also kind of weird to me that, like, I mean, they nuked the monster, right?
I don't know if they nuked it or just like bombed it hard.
Bombed it, which was like real close to him.
Yeah.
But like that camera footage still survived.
Well, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
But it also got me thinking, like, what would you say if you had what would be your final words?
Ooh.
You know what mine would be?
What's that?
Tom's Chihuahuas. Fuck y'all.
You can go. It
would literally be
the
like,
Ving rhymes.
I just want everyone to know I lived a miserable life, and I literally hate every one of you. I'm dead now. You're not. F you all.
Oh man, I don't know what I'd say. I would probably just list a bunch of bands that I feel like not enough people listen to. Just like on the off chance that this gets any airplay, here's how I want to use it.
I love it, because I know that would happen.
Yeah.
Well, I also know, like, if we were the ones that survived, like, or were filming, like, mine would just be like stupid as hell, like what I said, and yours would be like super thoughtful, much like everything,
No,
like,
mine would be like, Wolf Parade is the best gift that Canada has ever given the United States, and those of you who haven't spent time listening to them or seen them live are harming yourself and spitting in the face of something beautiful.
Right. Yeah.
And no one would listen to either of us, which is, just like this podcast. Am I right?
That's a good point. Yeah. Oh, I'm sad.
Yeah.
But that's why I would come up with mine. Fuck y'all.
Yeah. But yeah, so the ending of this movie, most importantly, gave you no information about anything that matters. Like, it was very deliberate. Like, they're just creating stuff for people to speculate about on the internet. It sparked a franchise that has multiple movies as well as like a comic series and some other stuff. So it was not super fulfilling as a standalone, but I think it did accomplish what it wanted to be in sort of creating the mystery and the discussion points and all of that. So.
And they probably knew like they were gonna expand it.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So like when you just watch this one, you might be left with a lot of questions, but you know.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I'm going to stop because the doorbell rang. My dog's here barking.
Okay.
So we have. I'm going to take a little break here. Did you know we got sponsored?
What?
We're sponsored by Tom's Chihuahuas. This is a business that this guy named Tom came up with, and it's chicken and waffle tacos. Basically, you call the number, they come, they make them for you. They actually stay the night, hang out, make you breakfast the next morning with chicken waffle tacos, and just use the promo code Tom's Chihuahuas, use the promo code The Horrific Pod, and you get 0.10% off. They're trying to make money, and I understand.
Yeah, gotcha. How does one spell Chihuahua?
It's CHIWACO 'S. Because it's Tom's. Wait. Don't. Damn it.
Oh, that's amazing.
I got fucked by punctuation again.
Story of my damn life.
Okay, so